You're listening to 105.3, The Gerblin, Dominaria's #1 music source for generic goblin noise.
Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. I am back in New Jersey, but that doesn't mean games from Montreal aren't going to get used. This week, I am playing Grand Warlord Radha, keeping a forest, a mountain, Spine Rock Knoll, Scour Tribe Elder, Throne of the God Pharaoh, Seasons Past, and Soul of the Harvest. My buddy Jeff is playing his Surrak deck, keeping 2 forests, Treetop Village, Steam Vents, Evolving Wilds, Cultivate, and Temur Charm. Matt is borrowing Jeff's Karador deck, keeping Gavany Township, Windswept Heath, Forest, Fleshbag Marauder, Viscera Seer, Exploration, and Temple of the False God. Lastly, Chris is playing his Wort deck, keeping a Forest, Gaia's Cradle, Stomping Ground, Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, Rude Awakening, and Hooded Hydra. Chris wins the die roll and starts us off. Chris plays a tap Stomping Ground, passing to Jeff. Jeff plays an Evolving Wilds, cracking it to find a basic and passes to me. I play a Spine Rock Knoll, hiding away a card. Matt plays a Windswept Heath, cracking it and taking 1 to go and find Overgrown Tomb, taking 2 to have it come into play untapped. He then casts a Viscera Seer and he passes to Chris. Chris plays a Forest and passes. Jeff plays a Treetop Village tapped and passes. I play a Forest, and I cast a Scour Tribe Elder. Matt plays a Forest, and he casts Exploration. He then plays a Hissing Quagmire, and he moves to combat. He hits Chris for 1 with a Seer, and passes turn. Chris plays a currently useless Gaia's Cradle, and passes. Jeff plays a Forest, and animates his Treetop Village. He swings it at Chris for 3, and, at the end of his turn, I sacrifice a Scour Tribe Elder to go and find a Forest. I play a mountain for my turn, and I cast Farhaven Elf. I go and find a forest, and pass my turn. At the end of my turn, Matt casts Entomb to find life from the loam, and places it into his graveyard. Matt draws for turn, and he plays Gavany Township, and then a Temple of the False God as his lands for turn. Moving to combat, the Seer hits Jeff for 1, and Matt passes turn. Chris boldly casts Animus Awakening where X is 1, and luckily reveals a mountain off the top. It goes to the field, and he passes to Jeff. Jeff plays a Shivan Reef as his land for turn, and he casts an Izzet Signet, followed by a Cultivate. He finds an island for the field, and a mountain to his hand. I play another Forest for turn, and pay 6 to cast Soul of the Harvest. I then pass to Matt. Matt dredges 3 instead of drawing to return life from the loam, and he casts it in his main phase. He returns and plays the Windswept Heath, taking 1 as he sacrifices it to grab a Godless Shrine, taking another 2. Moving to combat, he swings a Seer at Chris for 1. Chris draws and plays a Forest for his turn, and he casts Gliss's Sunseeker before passing to Jeff. Jeff plays a Yavimaya Coast as his land for turn, and casts Phantasmal Image, having it come in as a copy of my Soul of the Harvest. Jeff then casts Surrak, drawing as his commander hits the field from his copied Soul Trigger. I play Temple of Abandon, scrying the top card and putting it on the bottom. I then cast Grand Warlord Radha, drawing as she enters. With nothing else, I pass to Matt. Matt dredges the life again instead of drawing, and he recasts it in his main phase. He grabs 2 lands from his graveyard, and he puts them to hand. He replays the Windswept Heath, cracking it and going to find a Plains. Matt then casts an Archon of Justice before passing to Chris. Chris taps out for his turn, and he casts Doubling Season. Jeff plays a Cinder Glade as his land for turn, and moves to combat. He swings the copied Soul of the Harvest at Chris, and Surrak at me. We both take the hit, and with nothing else, Jeff passes. I play a mountain for my turn, and I swing everything at Jeff, making green, green, and a red from Radha's triggers. Jeff animates the Treetop Village, blocking the Farhaven Elf, and then casts Temur Charm, giving Surrak +1/+1, and having him fight my Soul of the Harvest. He then takes 3 from Radha, and in my second main phase, I use the 3 floating to help pay for Immaculate Magistrate. I then cast a Regal Force, drawing only 3 cards as it enters the battlefield. Matt simply draws for turn, and he casts a Fleshbag Marauder. I let the Regal Force go, Chris sacrifices Glissa, and Jeff animates and sacrifices the Treetop Village, and Matt lets the Marauder die. Moving to combat, the Archon hits Jeff for 4. In his second main phase, Matt casts Karador, needing only to pay 3, and then he casts Birds of Paradise from his graveyard. Chris casts a Hooded Hydra where X is 2, but with the fancy Doubling Season on the board, the counters get doubled and Chris has a decent 4/4 on the board. He then passes turn. Jeff plays an Alchemist Refuge, and he casts Harbonize, drawing 3 cards. Moving to combat, Surrak comes my way once more, and the copied soul goes at Matt. We both decide to just take the hit, and Jeff then passes turn. I play a Wirewood Lodge as my land for turn, and I cast Sylvan Ranger, going to find a mountain and putting it to my hand. I then cast Reclamation Sage, blowing up Jeff's Signet, and drop a Heritage Druid because who doesn't love mana? Moving to combat, Radha goes at Jeff. Jeff declares no blockers, and I respond by tapping the Magistrate to give Radha 5+1/+1 counters. I then untap the Magistrate with the Wirewood Lodge, and tap it again to give Radha 5 more +1/+1 counters. As a result, Jeff takes 13 commander damage, and the race is on. In my second main phase, I tap 3 elves with my Heritage Druid to make 3 green mana, paying 2 of it to cast Throne of the God Pharaoh. I then pass my turn, and at the end of my turn, all of my opponents lose 5 life. Matt dredges life from the loam once more, and he casts Marin from his graveyard with Karador's ability in his main phase. Moving to combat, Matt swings the Archon at me for 4. He then casts life from the loam in his second main phase, returning 3 lands to his hand. He plays a tap Shambling Vent and a Windswept Heath, which are a bit off camera. Matt then casts Victimize, targeting Fleshbag Marauder and Grand Abolisher, and sacrificing his Birds of Paradise. Matt also gains 1 experience counter as the birds die. With the Marauder coming in, Jeff sacrifices Surrak, I sacrifice the Sylvan Ranger, and Chris has to sacrifice the Hydra, and Matt lets the Marauder go to the bin. With the Hydra dying, Chris gains 8 Snake tokens, as the 4 he's supposed to get gets doubled by Doubling Season. Matt then sacrifices the Grand Abolisher to scry with the Viscera Seer, gaining another experience counter. He bottoms the card, and at the end of his turn, Matt brings back Fleshbag Marauder. Jeff has to sacrifice his Soul of the Harvest, I lose my Reclamation Sage, Chris loses a Snake, and Matt sacrifices the Marauder once more, gaining another experience counter. On Chris's upkeep, uncomfortable with the amount of mana his Cradle will tap for, Matt sacrifices the Archon of Justice to his Viscera Seer, gaining another experience counter, and exiles Chris's Cradle. In his main phase then, Chris taps out to cast Parallel Lives, and he passes turn. Jeff plays a tap Steam Vents, and passes. I draw for turn, and I play a mountain. I cast a Bramblewood Paragon, tapping 3 elves and then some lands to pay for Seasons Past. I return Reclamation Sage, Sylvan Ranger, Regal Force, and Soul of the Harvest. I then recast Sylvan Ranger and go to find a basic. Reclamation Sage then rejoins the party, blowing up Chris's Parallel Lives, and I move to combat. I swing Radha, who now has Trample thanks to the Bramblewood Paragon, at Matt. Matt takes the hit, and I pass turn. At the end of my turn, all of my opponents lose another 4 life from my Throne trigger. Matt dredges life from the loam again, and reveals 2 lands and a Disciple of Bolas. He pays 5 to recast the Archon of Justice from his graveyard, and he cycles Tranquil Thicket. Matt then plays a Marsh Flats, and sacrifices the Archon to the Seer, and exiles my Throne. Sad times. Matt gains another experience counter, and he passes, and at the end of turn, he returns the Archon to the field with Marin's ability. Chris casts a Gelatinous Genesis in his main phase, paying 1 for each X. This results in the super amazing 2-for-1 deal thanks to the Doubling Season, and he passes. At the end of turn, Jeff flashes in Surrak. Jeff draws for turn, and he passes to me. For my turn, I recast Regal Force in my main phase, drawing 7 cards for 7 mana. I then move to combat, and I swing my Bramblewood Paragon at Matt, and Radha at Chris. Matt animates the Shambling Vents to block the Bramblewood, and Chris blocks with everything for Radha. With the blockers declared, I activate the Magistrate to put 6 +1/+1 counters on the Paragon, and then untap the Magistrate with the Wirewood Lodge, retapping it to put 6 more onto Radha. Matt's Shambling Vent dies, but he prevents some of the damage with Toughness and Lifelink attached to the land. With one of my opponents having taken more than 7 damage, I activate Spine Rock Knoll to cast Evolutionary Leap, and discard down to 7 before passing. Matt draws for turn, and he sends the Archon at Jeff for 4. In his second main phase, Matt casts Disciple of Bolas, who lets him sacrifice the Archon of Justice, gaining 4 life, drawing 4 cards. Matt then casts Skull Clamp, putting it onto the Disciple and drawing 2 cards, which reminds him that he should have exiled something with the Archon. He hits Radha with the trigger, albeit a bit delayed. Matt then equips the clamp onto Karador, sacrificing it to Viscera Seer, and has Karador go to the graveyard, scrying the card to the bottom before drawing 2 cards. At the end of his turn, Matt brings back Archon of Justice thanks to Marin. Chris plays a Rootbound Crag as his land for turn, and he casts Comet Storm where X is 2 and kicks it once. He targets my Heritage Druid and my Immaculate Magistrate. I float 3 green by tapping 3 elves with Heritage Druid and sacrifice the Immaculate Magistrate to Evolutionary Leap. I reveal off the top until I hit Bloodbraid Elves, putting it to my hands. The elves then die, and Chris passes turn. At the end of turn, Jeff overloads Cyclonic Rift, and with the spell in the stack, Matt sacrifices the Archon to the Seer, scrying 1 and exiling my Wirewood Lodge upon death. Jeff plays an island for his turn, and he casts Xenagos, God of Revels. He moves to combat, putting the Xenagos trigger on Surrak. My being at 12 commander damage is too big of a target for Jeff to pass up, and he swings Surrak at me and takes me out. For Matt's turn, he recasts Viscera Seer in his main phase, but Jeff counters it with a Dissipate. Matt then tries to cast Marin, which resolves. Matt then sacrifices both of his fetches to go and find 2 basics, and he casts a Deathrite Shaman, and then recasts Exploration. At the end of his turn, Matt uses Marin's trigger to bring back Fleshbag Marauder, sacrificing the Marauder to its own trigger, while Jeff sacrifices Surrak. Chris plays a Kessig Wolfrun as his land for turn, and he casts Nissa's Renewal, grabbing 3 basics and gaining 7 life. With nothing else, he passes it to Jeff. Jeff draws for turn, and he plays a Mountain. He then plays 7 to cast Sphinx of Athun, and has Chris make 2 piles. Chris's piles consist of 4 lands and a Zealous Conscript, and Jeff takes the Conscript. Moving to combat, Jeff puts the Xenagos trigger on the Sphinx and swings it at Matt. Matt has a surprise blocker though, flashing in Restoration Angel, who flickers Marin before selflessly sacrificing herself so that Matt may live. With nothing else, Jeff passes turn. For Matt's turn, he swings Marin at Jeff for 3. And in his second main phase, he taps his Deathrite Shaman to exile one of Jeff's spells, dealing 2 to Jeff and Chris. He then taps a lot of mana to cast Chord of Calling where X is 7, and he goes to find a Runescar Demon. Matt then tutors for a card, and he plays 2 to cast Altar of Dementia. Moving to his end step, he brings back the Archon of Justice with his Marin trigger. Chris double checks his mana, and then casts an Entwined Rude Awakening. This turns all of his lands into 2/2s, and he untaps them all. With Jeff and Matt at a precariously low life total, it's a simple matter to send lethal amounts of damage at both of them to win the game. Game review time! So I definitely sympathize with people who play Voltron. It can often be hard deciding who to attack and when to attack, and whether or not I should take someone out. I kinda kept bouncing back and forth between Jeff and Matt depending on what they had on their board. This had me spreading myself a bit thin, and as a result, Jeff was free to take me out very easily later on. Jeff didn't seem to draw too much gas, and I think he used the Phantasmal Image on the Soul of the Harvest to try and get more draw and find more answers. He did have some answers, but it did seem like he was drawing quite a few lands, especially when you highlight how the Sphinx of Athun gave him 4 lands and only 1 card that he could actually cast. Matt's game plan seemed to be pretty straightforward. He abused Marin, allowing him to bring back Archon of Justice, and exiling permanents is always a good feeling. He did take some incremental damage from the shocks and the fetches, but I think on the whole, had it not been for Chris, he probably would have won the game. Chris did a pretty good job of just sitting back and not drawing too much attention. Yes, he had Doubling Season out, which is often a target for people to run or remove or kill the player who controls it, but he never really had any token generators outside of the Hooded Hydra. This is one of the few times where I've seen Rude Awakening cast and used as an Entwined spell to make all of the lands into 2/2s. Typically I see Trevor or Harry abuse it to untap all of their lands and use it to storm off, so it was kind of refreshing to see it used in a different capacity. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.